What's up, New Age Insider listeners? It is the last mark standing, and this is another edition of Indie Pop. Your boy, Damian G and his partner in crime, Heel Trina herself, the Marquis Mark. What's up, Tree?
Hey, what's going on?
So, the word of today, everybody, is decorum. And if you're an avid Last Mark Standing listener, you know what we mean by decorum.
Mm-hmm.
But for those that aren't familiar, when we start going on one of these diatribes, decorum usually dictates how you're supposed to act or what's acceptable in certain situations. Trina and I often take rude fans to task at events because they lack decorum or any sort of just read the room. And I feel like this is the perfect opportunity because, as a lot of you may not know, Trina and I and a few others will be making a really wacky pilgrimage this weekend all about the Midwest to catch some wrestling. And I have a feeling I'm going to see a different type of audience at each event. So I feel like we should do a primer episode on just behaviors, decorum, and some of the things that we've either experienced or we maybe intend to experience. I don't know. Maybe we're just on edge about it. So let me start here. When you go to an indie show, Trina, what are some things to look out for that may want to give a wrestling fan pause for cause?
Oh man, put me on the spot.
That's what I do.
Yeah. Well, one, and this is very topical today, or it came up today with Cookies and Cree. She posted this. I would just notice if this is a family show, like legit a family show. I mean, there are definitely shows that bill themselves as family shows, and there's maybe two kids there. There are shows that bill themselves as not family friendly, and the room will be filled with kids. CZW, there were children there. We were sitting next to children. So, I mean, that's the thing. Like, I think for me, that's one of the things that I sort of noticed, like, right away. Because that tells you sort of like the tenor of the crowd already. If it's a bunch of adults, a bunch of young guys, if there's a lot of alcohol, like those are the things that you read right away. It's like, what kind of situation is this? Is this rowdy? Is this fun? Is this Chikara or is this CCW? Pretty much, like you can tell right away from the crowd what kind of show this is going to be, and that I think that's probably the best way to walk into a room and go about it that way, I think.
Now, let's say you're in this room and you see the aforementioned drunk dude, or dudes plural. What do you suggest for a novice independent wrestling fan who goes to the events to do?
Okay, so the drunk dude is very common, obviously, in independent wrestling, professional wrestling. You go to WWE, they have it. Pretty much any sport. I think you do have to differentiate between the drunk dude that has control of himself and can still function normally as a human being respectfully. Like, let those guys be. Like, there are going to be groups of people that are drinking and they'll make comments here and there. That's actually the group that, like, you leave alone, because like, they're the group that, like, they're trying to be good. They're doing their own thing, but they're not, like, really actively ruining the show. That's the kind of group that you have to just suck it up and deal with. And then you have the other group, or the other guy, the one guy that's just ridiculous. He might not even have an alcohol, like a beer in his hand. He's just acting like he's been drinking since 7 a.m. because he's screaming things that have nothing to do with the show. He's screaming jokes that, as like a fan, makes you think that, like, he doesn't even know who's in the ring. You know what I mean? Like, he's just taking it based on their name alone, or with what they're wearing or whatever. Like, that this guy is a noob. He doesn't attend this show often. He's not a regular. He might not even like wrestling, for all you know. I just went to the UFC here in Kansas City, and we had that guy 3 rows behind us, and literally it just cleared out around him, like all the seats around him, because he was just screaming nonsensical things during the fights, during crucial moments of fights. And so those are the people Those are the people that you have to look out for. And when I say look out for, I mean, don't be afraid to tell them to shut the F up.
Okay, well, not everyone's as brave as you. So what do you suggest just to avoid?
No, I mean, honestly, that is my advice. Like, I don't believe in being like the person that sits on their hands and ignores it. I mean, you're at a wrestling show. Like, if you're ever going to stand up for yourself or stand up for a group of people or make a scene, it's a wrestling show. And I just feel like there has to be, for every jackass in the crowd, there's got to be one or two people willing to tell him to shut the F up. You know what I mean? Because if not, then like you're just going to ruin the show for people. You might ruin the promotion. You might ruin it for the wrestlers. You're ruining it for the kids. Like, I mean, just imagine like the damage that person's doing.
Right. Well, I can imagine one thing right now where
Mm-hmm.
I can speak to this. When
Mm-hmm.
I remember one of the first BCW shows I went to with Rick
Mm-hmm.
or with Matt, and there was just one dude, man. And I've seen this kid be a ref before for BCW, so I kind of,
Mm-hmm.
you know, he's kind of working with the promotion or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But every chant, everything was obnoxious to the point where the crowd was saying, "Fuck that guy, fuck that guy,
Right,
fuck
right.
that guy."
Yeah.
We've seen it in WWE, like Raw Brooklyn, where people are screaming, "We are awesome,"
Hello?
and then I'm saying,
Okay.
"No, you're not."
Mm-hmm.
You know, and Glory Pro was another one where there was somebody in the front row where we were
Mm-hmm.
sitting a few seats down from myself and from Papa, and he was just saying the most random
Mm-hmm.
chants that had nothing to do. And I remember one specifically: "Play
Mm-hmm.
like a champion today. Play like a champion today." And if you go back and rewatch the first show, you
Mm-hmm.
hear this at some point. I'm thinking, that's the Notre Dame chant. What does this have to do with?
Yes.
You know,
That there is some insider baseball here, because I do believe, and this is just my experience because I am in this area, the St. Louis, Kansas City area. That's an
Mhm.
Everett Connors thing. Like, I don't know if he's like a big, I don't know if he's like a big Notre Dame fan or something. Like, there is some sort of Notre Dame thing that follows him, but it's very insider, and which is very much part of the St. Louis scene. It's really interesting. We can talk about this later in the show, but I found this a lot with St. Louis fans, is that they have such a rich history, and the fans that have been watching wrestling there for 15, 20 years really like to make it known wherever they are that they've been watching wrestling in St. Louis, independent wrestling in St. Louis for, forever. It's a weird thing.
Huh.
Or maybe not, or maybe it's totally normal. I feel like maybe other territories have the same thing, but I went to Cape Girardeau. I'm going to blank on the name of the promotion, but they did a super show with Jeff Cobb and Colt Cabana and Joey Ryan. And, there was a group of guys sitting in front of me who kept chanting Anarchy Pro when Davey Vega was wrestling Joey Ryan, which Anarchy Pro was the old like establishment indie wrestling organization there before NWL, National Wrestling League, bought all of the indies.
Mhm.
So Gary J, like Matt Fitchett, Davey Vega, they all got their start. Actually, TJP, I think there's a couple people in WWE that got their start at Anarchy Pro.
Okay.
So to wrestling fans in St. Louis who've been wrestling fans all their lives, I mean, these are guys that are in their 20s, like 30s. They've been wrestling fans all their lives. Like, that's their little way of, it's their little wink and nod Easter egg to, like, we've been fans for a really long time. St. Louis wrestling still means something. And so I believe, and this is all conjecture, that guy in the front row was like, I'm a real fan. I've been here for a while. I know the Everett Connors thing is play like a champion today.
Okay, so now that makes a lot more sense, because it was during the Everett Connors match.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So I just didn't understand the correlation between the Notre Dame chant and Everett Connors.
But it's interesting, because why as fans do we have to establish ourselves like that? Do you know what I mean? Because I could see the mindset of somebody like that, and I'm not calling this person out, but like, if you're in a crowd and you've been going to wrestling in this venue for 10 years, 15 years or whatever, and suddenly you go to Big Mike's promotion and you see all these out of town people, which is like you, Alex, Gabby, all these people that are new. Do you feel like you have to establish that you're you're like an old timer. You're legit.
Mm.
Because that's what I feel like that is, right? Like,
you see with that, now that you bring this up,
yeah.
it kind of correlates to something we've been talking about off air about
Mm-hmm.
wrestling fans who are territorial.
Mm-hmm.
And, I know the territory days died a long time ago, but I feel like some fans kind of forgot.
Not with the fans. Not with the fans.
Don't let it die. So they have to maintain their territory to just be dicks about it, or to,
right.
Insert dominance. Yes, I know this. Well, because even when we went to Battle Club, like, I don't get the sense there were a lot of people who were trying to take over the premises, so to speak. I think if anything, we were the ones that were the most vocal, but I guess it really does depend on the place you go to, because, and I'll see this when I go to AAW with you all.
Yes, you will.
I'm not familiar with all this, so this may be a bit of a culture shock for me.
Yeah.
I'm interested in seeing what develops just from a humanistic standpoint.
Yeah, for sure.
But me, after a while, it's going to be like, all right, dude. All right, lady, you might want to chill out on that.
Exactly. Right. And that's the thing, is that I was at Cape Girardeau for this, for CCW, for the Super Show, and the whole row of guys, they didn't see me. So there was 5 or 6 of them, who'd been in the St. Louis scene for a long time. They've watched Davey Vega pretty much go from like a boy to a man. They were chanting Anarchy Pro, Anarchy Pro. And then they turn to each other and they go, haha, nobody knows what we're talking about. And then I chime in, I'm like, I do. And they're like, oh, Marky Smark. I didn't know you were going to, like they just like, they thought they were in on their little joke until someone else was there. So it's very much so like an insider asserting dominance sort of thing. It's like, we're the real wrestling fans and you're not.
Do we do that, you and I?
I don't know. Not necessarily. I think we are definitely, we could be classified, if you wanted to classify us as any sort of bad fan. And this really came up at Battle Club Pro, which in our defense, came up because the crowd was dead, to be honest. But we're, every once in a while we can be those fans that just like to put ourselves over, like to make the jokes, the funny jokes, and pop the crowd, and like have the wrestlers break and stuff like that. I mean, we can be those people. Like I said, Battle Club is probably the best example of it, but I think otherwise, we both try to be really respectful. What's interesting is because that we talk about this is because everybody who's listened to Last Mark Standing or Indie Pop, my beef with PWG, is that when I was, I think I was yelling about it, whatever, last week or 2 weeks ago, where the last time I went off on PWG, I had a bunch of people from Southern California tell me that they've never been able to get tickets, and it's to the point where they believe that they will be ostracized when they finally do get to go. That they feel like once they get there, the regulars will tell them that they don't belong. And that struck a chord with me so hard, because that's not wrestling, like you should be able to go to any show and fit in seamlessly with the fans. Like, that's the point. Like, it shouldn't be like a display of who's a better fan or who's, but it is sometimes.
You know what? Now that you're talking about this,
don't you love how we always like end up on another subject than we talk about?
That's the best part about radio and broadcasting, is that you go from subject to subject so seamlessly.
Yeah.
When you go to events alone, how do you feel?
I go to pretty much almost 99.9% of events alone, because I do them here in the Midwest and everybody's based in different places. I mean, it's rare. When I went to New York, that's really the only time that I've gotten to go to a show with my friends, with my wrestle family. So I do feel really lonely. I feel super lonely, and not as bad during the show, because the fun thing is, like, a lot of the time the only people I know at a show are the talent. Especially if I go into like middle of nowhere Missouri, for example, because I'm in Kansas City. I went to go support Danny Adams and Matt Kenway. that is definitely a crowd that just goes to the wrestling show because that's the only form of entertainment in the town. They didn't know who the wrestlers were. I didn't even think they liked wrestling, so it wasn't my crowd already. And I was only there to support two wrestlers. I didn't know anyone else on the roster. So that felt lonely. And that's how it is sometimes, is that like when I go to these shows, that the only people I know sometimes are actually working in wrestling. But I try and make myself part of the community. I've done it at IWA. I love the crowd there, but I remember my first time walking in that I was like, I feel like I don't belong here in so many ways. But
What do you mean?
If you remember our episode, we did this a long, long time ago. The first time I went to IWA Mid-South, which is like in a barn outside of Louisville. Just demographically, I didn't, a female person of color was not something that was well represented there. And so it just was it became very aware to me that, I don't know, I was maybe different than everyone else. And so, I don't know, after I got over that hump, because that's the thing, after that first show, and IWA welcomed me back each time with open arms, and they're great with me on social media. Like I consider them family. But the very first time it was a little weird. It's like, oh, look, one of these things isn't like the other, like doesn't look like everyone else or whatever. And that can be weird.
And this episode of Indie Pop is brought to you by the letter A, the number 4.
Right, exactly.
How very Sesame Street.
Right. And I mean, I imagine that's how it's going to feel for you walking into AAW or anytime you're walking into a big promotion that you've heard about, like PWG, or whatever. And you some people, the crazy thing is, look, like with PWG, I know AAW, a lot of people watch the iPay-per-views or they watch the DVDs religiously. To the point where they know who the regulars are, so that when they do actually get to go in person, if they get the chance, which is not often, not everybody gets to make towns, first of all, is one thing. But once they actually get to see those people in person, it's like, how do you make yourself feel a part of that? You know what I mean? Like naturally, organically. I think you're always going to feel like an outsider unless you have people with you.
I was going to say, so is it safe to assume that in keeping with decorum that you're supposed to just sit there and enjoy the wrestling and not be too much of a nuisance?
Oh God, I'm the wrong person to ask.
I know, that's why I'm asking.
I'm the wrong person to ask. I have a very strong belief about how a wrestling crowd should be, or how a wrestling crowd should support a wrestler. I see them as performers. I see wrestling as an art, and I think a crowd that's very, very connected with the wrestler, a crowd that's reacting to the wrestler is a good crowd. Like that's what's helping the performer perform. Like it helps them know that like, oh, that move that I just did or that sequence we just did was good. And so I'm very much so about being demonstrative and showing the wrestlers that I'm on their side and I'm here to cheer them on. And so there have been times where I'm the only one, sometimes in the front row, screaming my head off, and I've had people call me out on it. There's a couple people that don't like the way that I operate at AAW, and
like what? How do you operate?
I'm just really enthusiastic about it. Like I react like everything is life or death, in which for some cases or in some matches, like it is, because I know some of the guys really well, and it's like, one of the big examples of this that a lot of people have seen was Pentagon and Sami Callihan did a death match, and I happened to be in the front row on the stage, and so that was actually the first night that I met Papa Hales, and I think that's my reactions on the stage are what sold him, what sold him on me being a real wrestling fan. We'd never talked before, whatever. He was down in a different section, so he could see me during the show. And pretty much like when we introduced ourselves to each other at the end of the show, he's like, "You're like the best wrestling fan I've ever seen," because I felt everything that I was watching, because I was so close, and it's like, some of these guys like I hang out with and stuff like that. So I don't know. That's how I am sometimes. I am the lunatic sometimes. I'm that person Like I might be that person that I'm telling you guys to tell to shut the F up.
Shut the F up.
You know? So I don't even know what to say at this point, because I'm telling you guys, I'm advocating for you guys to police the crowd and like police the fools. But every once in a while, in some cases, I'm considered the fool.
So do you have to self-police?
Yeah, you know, like I am a person with anxiety. I self-police all the time. So it's like, you know, so it's like literally like I'll say something and immediately know that was like not the right thing to say. You know, so it's just like I at least know when to stop. You know, like I'm not gonna keep like trying to push my chance over or whatever. I mean, I'm not even a big chancer anyway, but you know, if my jokes like fall flat, I'm not gonna keep working the room. So
right.
Well,
because you're smart enough to know, okay, this isn't working. Let's put a pin in this till later.
Yeah.
So some people don't have that ability to do those things. And
no,
go ahead.
Sorry, there's an added layer to it because sometimes, and this was very much early on, like before we started doing indie pop, and it was the early days of Last Mark Standing, where I felt like I had to be loud sometimes just to prove to people that I was a wrestling fan, that I wasn't just somebody's girlfriend who wandered in, or I was being dragged along by a guy. So some shows, like I'm saying all the insider chants, I'm saying all the inside jokes that I know about wrestlers, because, you know, I wanted people to know that like I knew what I was seeing, that I was there for a reason, and it was specifically to cheer these wrestlers on and watch independent wrestling. And, you know, it's just sort of, I mean, I'm like that generally, but in the beginning it had a purpose. You know, and now like there are probably some shows now where I'm not as loud. Like people know when I'm having an off night and things like that. But, you know, it kind of sucks that in the beginning, that was my way of establishing dominance. Speaking about establishing dominance, that was my way of doing it.
So in keeping in that vein also, I don't want to make it gender specific because we're talking about guys, but in your experience, how do women act at pro wrestling events?
For the most part, God, and I hate to do this because, you know, like I try and be equal, you know, like a lot of the times, like the girls aren't really doing much. I would say 80% of the time, or if you took a room and you took all the females that were there, I would say 80 to 90% are just watching. Not even really reacting. Some could be looking at their phones. You know, there's one woman I was at, she was just like reading a book. Like, I think she brought her kids. In her defense, she brought her kids and her kids were loving it. And she was just like, this is the thing I take my kids to, and I'll just read a book while they're watching this. And then like right in front of her, there's like chairs and people bleeding and all sorts of crazy stuff. But you know, like that was the stereotype to me. Like of all the shows I go to, it's just like the girl that's not paying attention, that's not interested in being there. And then every once in a while, and we know a lot of these women, you get the women who are super into it and want it to be known that they're fans and they know what they're watching and they know who they're seeing and they follow the circuit really closely. You know, so it's like sometimes it's either or, you know, like you're either clearly a fan, a female that's a fan, or you're just a female that's there. God, I'm gonna get shit for this.
And you could send that hate mail to the Marcus Mark on Twitter or myself at Dare to Be Damian, because we like hate mail, especially this past week.
I feel like the women that are reading books in the crowd are not listening to our podcast, and the women that do, you know, that are very emotive and enthusiastic aren't even listening to the podcast because they're busy doing their own podcasts. Like these are the type of women that we know. I don't know any in between girls who are like lukewarm about it. You know, like you're either like into it or you're not.
Okay, that makes sense, because now I'm trying to rack my brain about if anyone fits that description that I know. And no, I mean the most tepid one would be Rick's wife. But she's a big WWE mark. You know, she's a casual, but she knows wrestlers and she knows history of wrestlers. So she's not one of those all the way outside the pool, but she's not the woman that's reading the book either. you know,
Right.
so.
Well, and you go see her at a WWE event. She probably like goes nuts for Shinsuke, like everyone does. You know what I
She
mean?
likes John Cena and
Right. Or
Roman
that.
Reigns.
Or that. You know what I mean? Like everyone's got their thing. If you are a wrestling fan, there is something that will pop you. So maybe she doesn't pop like when you guys are at indie shows, but I guarantee you she's probably got like one or two wrestlers that she'll pop for hard.
That did not sound right, but thank
I
you for
don't
saying
care.
it that way.
I don't care.
So, Rick, I know you're listening. She did not mean it
Yeah.
in that
Yeah.
realm.
Your wife pops hard for John Cena. Oh my God.
I can only imagine his reaction when he hears this.
Oh my God.
Okay, and staying with
theme.
behaviors
Yeah.
at indie wrestling events, something else that came up recently was it was like a what to do in regards to pictures with wrestlers or even having exact change for wrestlers, because a lot of them don't have change in their little fanny packs.
Right.
So let's start there. Let me start with this. The fanny pack thing. Now, I know a couple of wrestlers, TJ Marconi is one of them, that he has the credit card reader. So I think that's smart. It's just, I think it's like an extra like $2 per shirt or per item because it's a transaction fee or something.
Yeah.
But why is it that most wrestlers have fanny packs?
This is a question that I feel like I won't even touch because,
like, is that where they keep the money, essentially?
That's where they keep everything. That's literally where they keep everything. Like, this is the only way that these guys know how to travel. Like, I've gotten on planes with wrestlers where the only thing they had was their fanny pack. Like, their whole lives are in these things. And it's like, I remember the first time I met Kurt Stallion. It was, we became instant friends. Like, we just get along really well. But I mean, he emptied his fanny pack in front of me. Like within like the first hour of us knowing each other. And I think I took a picture of it. There's a picture somewhere on my Instagram of, it's like, ooh, the mysteries of what's inside a wrestler's fanny pack. And literally he had everything you could think of under the sun in that fanny pack. Contacts, money, like anything you would need. So take, whatever when you were in high school or like in college and you had your like backpack, like, or a woman's purse, and condense that into a fanny pack, and that's what a fanny pack is for a wrestler.
Okay.
I will not go on record and say more than that, because like I said, it's such a sacred thing that I won't even touch the subject. Like all I will say is that I've seen that guys just keep their entire lives in there. It's pretty much the only way that because they usually will have a fanny pack which has all the important stuff, like absolutely important stuff, like their contacts and the money and stuff like that. And then they'll have another bag that's just their gear, because like all of their
I've seen that.
Right. And so that's the thing. The fanny pack becomes essential because you're not going to like keep all the like loose ends in your giant bag of gear. You're going to keep everything together. And so it's just like all of their lives are condensed into this one thing. And so that's what I'm saying. I've literally seen wrestlers get on planes where the only piece of luggage they had was a fanny pack. Like,
nice.
That's it. Like, that's all. It's like, yeah, my whole life is in here, right here. Like, so that's as far as I'll go. I know though that they're sacred. It's really, it's a worker thing. I've made jokes before about like, I'm going to start wearing a fanny pack or whatever. And like immediately felt like I was an asshole for saying that. Like, like it just seems like it's a badge of honor, like I don't know. I would feel like a dick, like wearing one on, like, ironically, like, oh, look, this is a good idea. Like, you can keep everything, like.
Well, I think anything in that's not wrestling in terms of having a fanny pack is not a good idea. We mock people who still rock the fanny pack, but they're not wrestlers and they don't have to make change like at Comic-Con or something.
Right. Exactly.
To sell their merch. Something that really irked me, and I shared this story last week, is when wrestlers don't have change, because it leads you to be asked out. As in my case with the Fred Yehi story about
Fred Yehi.
He didn't have the change for his picture. And I'm like, this dude took like $7 from me. Like, what the hell, man?
Right. Right. Yeah, I mean, and that's just one of those things that you learn from going to enough indie shows, is not to bring big bills.
No big bills.
Right. It's come to the point where like if I only had that, I felt like the jerk. Like I should know better. I should be able to make change because, you know, God forbid, like you don't buy somebody's shirt because they can't make change or whatever. I mean, you know, it's just, those are just one of those unwritten rules, to the point where I think I went to CCW last week. I'd just seen my mom, and for some reason she gave me $100 bill, for emergencies, or I don't know, whatever. Which
That's a mom thing to do.
I'm 35 years old. And so she gave me $100 bill, and I'm like, what the fuck am I supposed to do with this? Sorry. And so it's just like, I get to see CCW and I'm like, I went to concessions because I felt like such a dick having to ask one of the wrestlers to break it for me, even though it would have been easier for them to carry around like $100 bill than like a bunch of, you know, whatever, a bunch of 5s or 10s or something like that. Like, because I just didn't want to put anybody in a bad spot. You know, I didn't want anybody to be like, yeah, I haven't made any merch sales, I can't break 100, you know? So I ended up breaking it at concessions, you know, and then going for the rest of the night from there. Cause yeah, I don't know. I just felt like a dick.
So don't be a dick. Make sure you have small bills. And
yeah.
Okay, where do you stand on the whole charging for pictures versus taking a selfie and not having to pay the wrestler for it?
Okay. Obviously, you know, like there are different tiers, you know, like we know this. There are people that are very much in high demand that you don't get to see very often. You know, stuff like that. Here, I will use this as an example. The very first Ring of Honor event that I went to was a pay-per-view. And it was a joint NJPW event. So like Okada was there, you know, a bunch of people from Japan that I never would have been able to see outside of Japan, just because it was just this one joint Ring of Honor New Japan thing that they were doing. They were charging for everything, you know, like $5, $10, I think $10 for a picture with them. But they were really like cool about like letting you hold their belts or whatever, you know, like getting behind the table. Like there are different levels of all of this, you know? And so it's like, okay, what do you get for your money? And I do sports collectibles too. So we have a lot of stuff. And so I've paid to spend 1 second with Emmett Smith while he like signs something for me, you know, and get an awkward picture across the table. And, you know, and sometimes that's like not his policy. Maybe it's like the policy of the wherever you're going. And so, for example, why I bring this up is at Ring of Honor, I gladly paid the $15 to take a picture with Okada because you know, you're never going to get to see Okada. Like, unless you're in Japan, I want him to feel like that this is a worthwhile experience, that Americans, you know, are going to respect like merch sales and pay him like, you know, to get something rare, which is a picture with him, you know, and in kind, he took like great pictures with everyone. Like, I don't think he didn't have a belt, but, you know, like everyone got to go behind the table, you know, take the picture. So it was a good picture. It wasn't the awkward, like, we're just going to lean in over the table and like, this is really awkward and weird. You know, so there's stuff like that. Like, recognize when there's a situation where like, look, everyone's paying, just pay the price, you know, suck it up sort of thing. Right. And then the gray area, I think, is where everybody was just sort of maybe fighting over it, is, and you'll see this at AAW, where it's just a free for all. The tables are just like lined up against the walls, and the exit is right in between the merch tables. So what you have is just like a cluster of like a ton of people sometimes just standing around in front of the merch tables trying to get out. Like they're not trying to dilly-dally. They're just trying to get out, go to the bathroom or whatever, but they're stuck in front of a merch table. So it's a mess. But that's part of the reason people love it, is because at the same time that makes the wrestlers really accessible. You can get pictures with them. Like a lot of them are pretty open to getting pictures with them. So it's organized chaos, you know? So I think the feeling there is like, okay, it's organized chaos. It's your call whether, you know, you want to like be a good fan and pay, or if a wrestler's like hanging out outside of the merch tables, then ask them for a picture there. See, that's where I think that's where you use your own judgment, you know, like I get that you want wrestlers to be accessible, and if they're not behind the merch table, then by all means they should say yes to take a picture and stuff like that. But again, it goes back to realizing that one t-shirt sale is whether somebody eats dinner that night.
Right.
So to me, that's the crux of the argument. So I understand that, like, oh, like they shouldn't charge us for, you know, a selfie or whatever, or $5. It's not that. It's like, you should be wanting to give the wrestlers as much money as you can. So it's
If you
like,
can. If you can.
if you can. And so it's like, I think sometimes we get confused. We put these guys on such pedestals or whatever, like, because they're wrestlers and we watch WWE on TV, that they have this awesome lifestyle and they're rich and famous and whatever, but you know, they're all just like working class people like us. And if you can afford to give them $5 for like a photo, then do it. You know, like, I don't know. I just feel like the people that I know who scrimp and can pretty much only afford to buy like a soda at shows are not the ones who are trying to get pictures from wrestlers without paying, if that makes any sense. You know, like the respectful ones, you know, if they can't afford it, they're not like going out of their way to inconvenience a wrestler.
I feel like for me, I never like to, I've done this maybe once or twice, where I've bought something in the past, but I bought the item for them to sign it after the fact, because I didn't get a chance for them to sign it. And I remember doing this explicitly with Ethan Page once at Glory Pro when you got him to sign the Wrestling Buddy. And then when I saw him again the next week at Evolve, he signed the other side. And, you know, and another one where I bought the Chosen Bro shirt from Riddle at Glory Pro.
Right.
But I got him and Cobb to sign it at Evolve the next week. And they didn't have a problem with it because I guess because I'm familiar. Well, I'm familiar for one, and for two, I'm not a dick about it. I say, hey, do you mind signing your shirt, you know, for me? Right. And if you ask and they know you've already bought merch from them before, maybe like recently, they won't mind as much. But if I'm bringing something I bought from, let's say, a year ago, you know, for like a Bullet Club shirt, I'm going to have Adam Cole sign it or the Bucks sign it. You know, no, I wouldn't do that unless it's like a hat that I'm never going to wear again, you know, and I'm going to frame it. That's understandable.
Right. I mean, I think it just goes back to a self-policing thing and like being just a good person and a normal person when it comes to this stuff. I mean,
you know, you're asking for a lot of wrestling fans to be a normal person.
I know. You know, but I understand, like, you want a selfie with somebody or you want a picture with someone, but, you know, do realize that they're like, this is their livelihood too. So if you can't afford to pay, then just pay, you know, like, I don't get it. You know, like, why do you want to like, sell a wrestler short? You know, like, why do you want to take money out of their pockets? Like, this is sort of the same stance I have with, bargaining and bartering and stuff when I'm on vacation. When I was younger, because I think if you guys listen to Last Mark Standing, you know, I've done, I think 25 countries like in the last 10 years or so. And so when we were younger, you know, we didn't have very much money. Everything was like on the cheap hotels, like cheap transportation, all sorts of weird stuff. And so if we went to a country where there were children begging, or there were a lot of homeless people in the street, or a lot of buskers or things like that, like, I wouldn't really have the money to give because, you know, I already was on a budget and things like that. And, you know, there are countries that have traditions of going to the street market or the market there and like bargaining with people, you know, like it's just part of the culture. It's ingrained in all this different stuff. I just went to Peru last year and literally everything you could sell under the sun was being sold on the street and everybody bargained everything. And I just went there. And this was last year. So, you know, I'm more established in life. I have more disposable income. I didn't barter with anybody because I just felt like at the end of the day, if I can afford to pay $5, why not give this woman an extra $2 or $3 so her kids can eat? You know, like you have to realize who you're bargaining with, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, they're famous wrestlers or whatever. Yeah, you see them on iPay-per-views or you hear about them all the time, but they're just still normal people. So it's like, why would you try and like take money out of their pockets? You know, so if you're on vacation and you see like a street vendor, like most likely that person isn't super rich. So like,
Right.
if you can afford to pay full price, just pay full price. Yeah, it's not going to be a very popular thing to say, but because I know all of my friends that have gone to Peru, they were like, oh yeah, I got this for for so cheap. Like I bargained it down to like 80% off, and I'm just like, really? Like, that super super old woman who's been sitting out in the cold for like 8 hours, like, you're proud that you saved $3 or $4, so you guys got to recognize that, like, these guys are going from like city to city, and it's like, anytime I can get them money or food or something extra, I do. Like, I'm not trying to take money from them.
You know what? You just brought up a really interesting point, and I had to deal with this before, where because you and I know a few wrestlers, we're on friendly terms with them or whatever the case may be. I've had people ask me for hookups from these other wrestlers saying, hey, can they get me a shirt for half price since you know them? And I said, no,
Yeah.
I'm not doing that for you.
Right. That's so
Get
dumb.
out of here.
Yeah. No, I know. I mean, come on, guys. Like, I get it, like, but this is why we grow up and get jobs and whatever. Because, like I said, I do sports collectibles too. And like my husband, like, that's what we enjoy now as adults, is that now that we're adults and I can afford to go to all the wrestling shows. I can afford to go to WrestleMania. He can afford to go and get like Cowboys helmets signed. Like, these are the things that we wanted to do as kids, and we were children. We didn't have jobs. We couldn't afford them. And so, you just do what you're supposed to do. You pay your bills, you get a job, you get enough disposable income that like, I don't know.
I know.
Everyone's struggling.
And I get it.
Everyone's struggling.
I think for me, I lie more on the side of, if you have enough money to at least buy a picture or a shirt, especially if it's a worker that doesn't have a t-shirt line, maybe they only have his 8x10s.
Right.
At the very least, prime example. I was at HOG, and Willow Nightingale, who I tell you I adore because she's just like this ball of positive vibes, so she didn't have a merch table. She just had 8x10s.
Yes.
So people were coming up to her and just asking for free pictures. Now, I'm okay with the kids getting free pictures because it's kids and they don't know any better.
Yes.
But at the very least, can you, if you're an adult, especially a male fan, and you're going to take a picture of a female wrestler, can you at least break the ice by saying something along the lines of, how much for the pictures, and do you mind, can we get a photo after the picture? I buy the picture.
Right.
Or something like that.
Right. Yes.
Unless you're catching them. Unless you're catching them on an off moment where they're about to leave, or
right.
Like they're not even at their merch table, and you ask nicely. Like, I asked Manny Leon once for a photo, and she wasn't at her merch table, and she obliged. She didn't care. She all she wanted to make sure was her hair was okay. Like, that was the worst part of that ordeal. Jeff Cobb at Evolve, we did the whole lean over the table thing, but it's because, one, he bought a Last Mark Standing hat, so I felt the need to say, hey, that's my hat, and two, I bought a shirt off of him.
Right.
So that's when you can do the stupid lean over the table, because you're contributing come of this person. It's like an artist, you want to contribute by buying maybe a print. Maybe you can't afford the full-fledged, oil canvas painting, but if you can get a reprint for $5, why not?
Oh yeah, I know, exactly. And I think the key word here in everything that you're talking about in your experiences is merch table. And this is what it comes down to. It's like, if you've been listening to our show for a long time, you know that those tables are sacred. They are sacred to wrestlers. They are sacred in wrestling. This is how the guys make their money. We've had this on other episodes. I've told you instances where a carload of guys has driven 13 hours to get to a show, only to be paid $50 each.
Yeah, I remember that.
Or like, then they get shorted on their trans, and suddenly they're like, all that $50 goes somewhere else. So this is where they make their money, and that's the thing to remember. So it's like, maybe you're catching them on their way out, like whatever. You ask for a picture, that's fine. But if you're anywhere near the merch tables, like, you better be paying for stuff. You know, like, don't be that person that just walks up to the merch table and asks for a free picture and walks away.
Mhm.
You got to understand how that looks. You know, and I understand it's just a picture, but they're trying to sell everything they can, like anything they can. You know, and
Okay.
so that example that you gave of I can't remember now, I'm blanking, who only had 8x10s. This is how it was for Zachary Wentz when he first started. He now has t-shirts, but it's taken him a really long time to get to that point. And prior to that, he had like postcards with like a drawing of him and then like some stats, and like he sold them for $5. That's all he had. That was like the only merch sales he was making. And, you know, it's like, I have one of his old postcards. You know, and it for me, makes me proud that like he's worked his way up to like now he's got 3 or 4 different t-shirt designs. And it's just like, I remember this kid when he couldn't, like, he would just beg people to like buy a picture, you know, and it was just like, oh God, you know, and he's so good too. It's ridiculous. Like to see him have to beg people to buy a postcard or a picture for $5, sucks.
Yeah, and no wrestler or artist should have to beg someone to buy their merchandise. I
Right.
mean,
Yeah.
at the very least, if you're not going to buy anything, you just want to say thank you for the great match and keep it moving. That's okay. You're paying a compliment, but you're not over here like, hey, can I get a picture? And I don't know. That's
Yeah, don't be a weirdo. I mean,
I think that's the prevailing theme with
yeah.
today's show on Indie Pop is just no, read the room, use your better judgment, you know, and just realize that you might be being a dick, even if you don't realize you're being a dick.
Right. Exactly. I mean, sometimes
I think that's pretty self-explanatory.
I think so. I think I understand. You can get caught up in being a mark and marking out and seeing, you know, things that you had only been watching on DVD or watching on streams before live. Like, I understand like getting caught up in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it just comes down to, realize when you're being a dick, realize that these guys are just regular people. They do, you know, get to do that fun thing that we love so much, wrestling. But at the end of the day, like, realize that they were like 8 or 10 of them were paid $200 to drive 13 hours. And then they wrestled like amazing matches and they're only getting like $50 out of it or less. Who knows? Sometimes they don't get paid.
That would piss me off.
Sometimes they don't get paid. And this is Indie Pop, so this is probably a good place to bring this up. But you don't know this. But one of the stories circulating right now, this is like the only time I ever get to surprise you with something. But so one of the stories circulating right now is that April 22nd, there was a show that went on in like Enfield, Connecticut, or somewhere in Connecticut. It was called Wrestling for Autism.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a benefit. All the proceeds were supposed to go to an autism charity.
I heard of it. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So a GoFundMe just popped up today. First, I first saw it posted by Gabe Sapolsky of Evolved fame, that the quote unquote promoter who ran the show wrote a bad check and ran away with all the money.
Are you kidding me?
I am not kidding you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. That's why I'm like, oh, I'm gonna like surprise him with something that's gonna make him really mad. They filled the place, 450 people, which is like almost double than what Glory Pro did for its first show. So imagine how big that is. Okay, so 450 people. Great wrestling. Alberto Del Rio was on that card. And he wrestled. It was one of the few cards that he actually showed up to, like, you know, and so they raised all this money for autism awareness. And apparently this guy's daughter is autistic.
The promoter.
The quote unquote promoter who put the show on.
Get the hell out of here. Okay.
Yeah. So, and the charity goes to cash the check. It bounces. They can't get a hold of him. He's nowhere to be found. And so pretty much all of the proceeds that were, all of the profit that was made from this show, that was supposed to go to an autism charity, gone.
Oh, I'm fucking heated. Pardon my language.
I know, right? And so now the people that were running it, the other people that were running it, so the wrestlers didn't get paid. You know, like that's what it sounds like to me. I don't know. Maybe it was just the charity that didn't get paid. I'm not sure. I don't know if like maybe the wrestlers didn't get paid. I have no idea. But they're doing another show. June 24th, like the people that got fleeced pretty much. And they're guaranteeing this is like a legitimate autism charity that the proceeds are definitely going to go. And they also have the GoFundMe going on as well to help raise money if you can't attend the second show. So that's the thing that happened in independent wrestling this week.
That is straight up douche-tacular, man.
Yeah. Wait until Sean Orleans finds about this.
Oh, he doesn't know?
I have no idea. He hasn't, like he's the one who he rants a lot about shit feds and all this different stuff and shoddy promoters and people that don't pay wrestlers and stuff like that. And so I don't know if he knows, because I just saw it today, like this afternoon as I was coming home. I just saw Gabe posted it, and yeah, that, I was super excited for that event because I have a cousin that I'm super close to that is autistic, and his brother actually lives in Connecticut. So for me, I was actually planning to go to the event, support, bring my cousin, like all this different stuff, make it a big family affair. And then even when I realized I couldn't go, I was like, you know what, I'll buy a couple tickets. And I think I did actually. I'm that person that buys tickets and I can never remember, but I think I bought like 1 or 2 tickets just so that, I don't know, to give them money. Yeah. I was super excited about this, and I retweeted them, I promoted them, and then, yeah, lo and behold, like a couple weeks later, all of the money's gone.
Wow. You actually called me at a point where I want to really get angry, but I won't because we're on the air. But
we're on the air.
I'm trying to stay professional, but let me just say this to the person that did this quote unquote promoter. Yeah. You are scum. You are a jackanapes, and I really hope that you burn in the fires, whatever pit you crawl into, for stealing money, not only from wrestlers and from people, yeah, but from a charity that's supposed to benefit those less fortunate than us in some aspect. Mm-hmm. I don't mess with kids, Trina. When it comes to children, that's my thing. I don't mess with them. I don't, that's my job. Right. So when I hear stories like this, I literally want to go up to this guy and punch him in the face.
Oh yeah, we all do. And
worse. I'm just not going to say it on air.
Right. And the thing for me, like I said, because I have a cousin who's autistic, and you know about this stuff. Autism isn't cut and dry. I don't know if that's the best way to put it, but there are conditions that it's very clear. These are the symptoms. This is what you have. We know how to treat it. We have proven therapy, technology, whatever. But autism runs the gamut. There's a spectrum. My cousin specifically, he can't verbalize things. He's a fantastic athlete. I mean, there are things that he can do amazingly, but he can't verbalize himself. But I know people that are autistic who can, so it runs the gamut, and it's very difficult to diagnose early and treat, properly. So it's just like anything that helps autism, I'm a sucker for. And so when I saw this event come up, I was so excited about it. And then to learn that like all the money is gone, it was like a punch in the gut.
Yeah. That just makes me want to punch people in the face now. So that's a great addition to this week's Indie Pop.
Oh,
so
God.
if you're like me and want to punch these kind of jerk offs in the face, you can tweet me at Dare to be Damian and let me know if there's someone that rings true to what Trina is describing, where a person is just shiesty in terms of pro wrestling and you don't trust them. And you could tweet me, tweet the show at Last Mark Podcast, Trina at the Marquis Mark. I had gotten into a conversation with someone at a recent event about checking his paycheck just to make sure he got paid. And we know people who have gotten, they've gotten shirked on money. Yeah. And I wanted to make sure this person made sure they got paid. So when I said, hey, did you get paid? What are you talking about? And I talked about the situation you're talking about the $50 thing. I said, you might want to be careful. And apparently their road buddy had the check, and he goes, oh my God, I hope he paid him, because if my buddy finds out he didn't get the full amount, he's going to pull a blade on this dude.
Right.
You know, so I'm like, oh yeah, you better go find out if you got paid, because I don't want to see anybody die. You know what I mean? So
yeah, I mean, it always goes back to the great Andrew Zarian. This is a carny business. Like these are agreements that are just made on people's word. So it's like, a promoter will book you and be like,
Yes.
this is what I'm going to quote you for trans. This is what I'm going to pay you. Sometimes they don't make that money.
No.
You know, like they don't make it at the gate. They don't make it at the door. And, you know, there are times where it's like, there's just no money. Like there's no money to pay the talent, even if you want to pay the talent. You know, so there's so much stuff going on behind the scenes, guys. So it's like, and these guys get injured and then suddenly they have a ton of bills. It's like, if you can pay $5 for a picture, just pay $5 for a picture. That's all I'm saying.
Especially if you know a wrestler's backstory, you know what they've been through. And I want to harken on this really quick before we get out of here. The thing with Dave Christ.
Yeah, God.
Having to make that post. I know you can't. So I'm just going to say, I can't believe someone had the unmitigated gall to say that about Dave Christ. And then for him to make a very polite and poignant retort to this gentleman, he's a better person than me. If you want to know more about it, go look up Dave Christ on Twitter. And
he's at the Dave Christ.
At the Dave Christ. And he's a better person than me. Let's just put it that way, because I would have handled this a little differently, but he showed class. He showed decorum, keeping with today's theme. And he just showed that he really is a stand-up guy.
Yeah. I mean, the gist of it, if you guys don't know or haven't seen it, is that Dave's been dealing with sciatic discs in his back since February. And so he's been wrestling since February with this problem where he has a lot of tingling and numbness in his legs. And there have been times, and this happens frequently during matches, where his legs just go completely numb. Right. And this is a guy that has a lot of high-flying moves. And so if you look at the timeline, he debuted at PWG in late February.
I remember.
And this happened with his back 2 weeks before. So he's been dealing with this since early February, and he's wrestling 2 shows this weekend. So he's been working hurt for about 3 months now. And someone had the audacity to say that he looked like he was phoning some of his matches in. And to say that, like, he was just wrestling his friends and he wasn't really like challenging himself and all this different stuff. And Dave addressed it in a post very eloquently and like Damian said, respectfully, more class than any of us has, really, for somebody who would say that sort of thing about us. So go check out at the Dave Chris on Twitter to see the post. And if you happen to see Dave, you know, this week or in the next couple weeks, know that he's still wrestling hurt. And he's going to keep wrestling hurt until, I don't know.
Until he gets money for his medical bill. So pay the man.
Yeah. So it's like, or he drops dead. Who knows?
No, we don't want that. I'd rather he be healthy and still climbing up walls, you know, for a living, you know, things like that. So if you see Dave, Jake, any of the Ohio guys, you know, Trina knows their story, and I know, you know, through her and through them, I know their stories. And are you prepared to drive 14 hours as a fan? You know what I mean? Like, these people just, they don't get it. You know, I bitch and moan about my commute, you know, to work. And these people are driving 14 hours, 15 hours, you know, peanuts in some instances.
Well, here's
ridiculous.
Yeah. Here's an interesting example. I mean, you know, you talk about the loop that we're doing this weekend with 3 shows. We're going to PW Revolver on Friday, AAW on Saturday, and then Glory Pro on Sunday. Kurt Stallion is not booked on the AAW show in Chicago, but he's helping to drive his buddies. So he's driving Davey Vega and Matt Fitchett, and he's just showing face. Like, he's going to see if he can help out, see if anybody needs anything. Like, that's the sort of dedication that we're talking about here. Like, they will make, you know, that, I think it's about 7 hours, 6 hours from Clive out to Chicago, just to like make people know that he's there. You know, and he's known for this. I mean, if you follow my Twitter, you know, Kurt Stallion, he'll drive 13 hours to work for 5 minutes and get squashed. That's how he's built his reputation. And that's why he gets booked crazy places, because people know that this guy will drive 12 hours. He'll go from like literally city to city without sleeping, just to put on a good show for 10, 15 minutes and let you know that Kurt Stallion's in the building.
You know what it is? What it is? It's because I know these stories that make the human element of independent wrestling that much more engrossing for me. Because I've always talked about the why. That's always my main motivation in life. If you followed my Twitter last night, I went on this little soliloquy about the why. And hearing these stories makes me want to support these people, even if we're not on friendly terms, or I don't know them. You know, I know this. I know what it takes to give up things for your dream. I'm going through it now. So I can be one of those people that says, okay, $5 for a signed picture. Screw it. Then we'll take a picture on my crappy cell phone afterwards. We all win in the end. That's that. You know, and it's just reading the room and just knowing that, man, they're not superheroes. I know they play them on, you know, in the ring, but they're human just like the rest of us. They need money. They need to eat. They need to pay their bills. You know, now all these people are rolling in WWE money. So
even WWE people aren't rolling in
WWE money that you think they should be making, because I found out Cesaro makes only like a low number. So I'm thinking, hell, you know, and to be a workhorse and to drive the 12. Look, man, I'm exhausted just thinking about flying to St. Louis and then connecting in St. Louis to go to Chicago, you know, and then we're driving back down to St. Louis. I'm tired just thinking about it. So I can only imagine these guys and gals who do this. So if you see him at a show, if you see him this weekend at any shows, just pay the $5, man. Like, honestly, what are you going to buy with it? Hot dogs? Get out of here. Hot dogs are bad for you anyway. No, forget it. So anything else before we get out of here, Tree?
That's it. I threw everything but the kitchen sink, maybe including the kitchen sink. Who knows?
Well, if it lands on anyone like Randy Orton, they'll be okay in like 10 minutes to go back and finish the match. Clean shaven, by the way. I know this isn't a WWE show, but I saw that he had a beard earlier in the match, and then he comes back clean shaven. What, the refrigerator knocked off his beard? Like, what the hell was that?
Right, it's a smart fridge.
You know, Kevin Dunn, go to hell. Like, honestly, you really let that one slide?
The funny thing is, I should have known that it was filmed in Kansas City because Raw was here a week ago.
Yes, it was.
And I had lunch with my friend who works on the production team, and he told me that there was a crew filming as we were eating. So he's like, I have no idea what they're filming, but they're off somewhere on like a closed location filming something. And lo and behold, that's what they were filming.
So yeah, that's our WWE tidbit for the week on Indie Pop. As always, we are the Last Mark standing. Find us at Last Mark Podcast, Trina at the Marky Smark, myself at Dare to be Damian. We are going to be exhausted from this loop on the weekend, so we hope to have some good stories from the road. Hopefully we don't kill anybody, because I know Trina and I are prone to like want to strangle people if they invade our personal space. So look out for that. If you don't hear from us in about a month, you know what happened. So thanks, Insiders listeners. We'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.